Oh, hot tents. They're such an easy, spacious, and relaxing way to stay warm in the backcountry. Hey guys, welcome to Escape the Indoors. My name is Josh. Hot tents over the past year have become really trendy. If you've been scouring Instagram and looking at all those pretty pictures of cozy looking hot tents, or watching YouTube videos of all that amazing food prepped on a hot tent stove, well, in this video I'm going to go over some things that if you're dreaming about a hot tent, you're probably not thinking about. And these are reasons why you should not buy a hot tent. Well, I owned a hot tent for about 3 months and had been on numerous trips from car camping to backpacking to base camping. And don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun learning how to use a hot tent and what all the hype is about. However, these are some things that you're not thinking about when you look at those pictures and watch those videos. So I'll go over these reasons from least annoying to what actually drove me to sell my hot tent. So the first thing was the setup. You need to find a pretty big space to set up a teepee tent. And this is just like the smaller teepee tents. And finding a big flat piece of ground, depending on where you live, is actually kind of hard, especially in the Northeast. And not only that, is you need about 8 stakes just to get the tent up. And these are pretty big stakes. They aren't ultralight like shepherd's hook stakes. These are pretty big stakes and they have to hold because they have to tension the tent's center pole to the ground. Also, the reason you buy a hot tent is to use it in cold weather. Well, in cold weather, the ground is frozen. So you have to hammer 8 stakes, not including the pullouts, into hard as a rock frozen ground, which is not that fun. And if there's snow, you have to be able to either dig out a space for your hot tent or figure out a way to make 8 dead man anchors strong enough to hold the tension of the tent. Okay, so you finally get your tent set up and pitched. Now it's time to get to work. First, you gotta put together the stove, which, if it's not the first time you use the stove, the heat has probably warped it, so it's a little bit tricky to get it aligned and get all those 4 legs screwed in, depending on the stove you have. Some stoves, I know, just fold out, which is nice. So now it's time to go hunt for wood, which, if you're car camping, is not that hard. You just buy wood. However, you have to make sure it's small enough to actually fit in that tiny little stove. And don't get me wrong, the act of processing wood is actually kind of fun, so I really don't mind that part. But it does take time that you could either be relaxing or hiking or eating or whatever. The next thing is space. Now I'm not talking about like the big hunting hot tents. Obviously, if you're hauling one of those out, you're probably base camping for a few days, which a hot tent will make sense. So the hot tents I'm talking about are probably 10 feet wide and 5 to 6 feet tall, what they call 3 to 6 person hot tent, which when you add the stove ends up being a 2-person hot tent, maybe. So if you're wanting to relax and chill in your hot tent, then you can't set up your sleep system right away because there will not be enough room. And I know when I started wanting a hot tent, it was the image in my head of 2 people chilling out, drinking beers, staying warm, next to the fire. Well, it's hard enough to fit 1 person with a chair, let alone 2 people with a chair in there. You can do it, but it's really not the picture-perfect image that you're thinking about. It also becomes weird when you're out with a group because you want to go sit in your hot tent, and that becomes kind of antisocial. And of course, with all that coziness in the hot tent, there's not a lot of room to move around, so there's that burn factor. Whether it's your hand or your gear, that's a big hole in a down jacket. Those stoves are hot, and you probably will eventually burn yourself. Next is the condensation issue. So anyone that's slept in cold weather knows about condensation freezing on the top of your tent. Well, in a hot tent, it's, hot, and the ground is wet, and you are breathing, and there's not a lot of ventilation up top. So all this condensation actually turns to water, and the walls of your hot tent get soaking wet. And if you bump into them or your down jacket hits it, it's gonna get soaked. That in itself is pretty uncomfortable. And also, if it is snowing outside, the warm walls of the hot tent is going to melt that snow, make it heavy, and further limit your space within the hot tent, making it not so comfortable. So my biggest pet peeve with the hot tent is the mess. If you burn the wrong kind of wood like pine, which is a very messy wood, or wet wood, which you're going to find in winter or the shoulder season, when you're going to use a hot tent, it's going to cause a lot of soot in the stove, in the pipe, in the spark arrestor, and it's really not fun to clean, and it smells terrible. Like everything is going to smell like smoke and fire. So you often see pictures of these really clean, nice looking hot tent stoves. Well, in the morning when you're packing up camp, you're going to have a stove full of ash and soot, and you have to clean that. And you either have to scrub it either at camp, or you have to pack it up and clean it at home. And then after packing up the stove, you have to pack up this really wet and probably muddy tent. I think cleaning the stove was probably the thing that I really hated and made me want to sell it. So some quick other considerations are, unless you're going to be keeping that fire lit all night, you have to bring a properly rated sleeping pad and sleeping bag for the temps you're going to be dealing with, because you're still going to have to be warm at night when the fire's not on, which in turn adds kind of redundant warmth weight for your trip. And besides that, it's just, there's a lot of stuff to deal with. You know, there's lots of pieces, there's lots of just parts to deal with when it's wet and cold outside, and it's kind of annoying to deal with it. I'm definitely not anti-hot tent, and they are a lot of fun. My two favorite things that I experience with a hot tent are the ability to melt snow really easily and really fast, cook and of course make coffee and hot chocolate, all that stuff really easily, and that morning fire. When you wake up and it's freaking cold outside and you just have to throw some wood into a fireplace at 5 a.m., go back to sleep, and then wake up into warmth, it's really, really nice. So guys, if you are dreaming about a hot tent, I hope this gives you some things to think about before shelling out your hard-earned cash. If you liked this video, please hit that like button because it motivates me to make more videos. Consider subscribing, and I hope you guys find time to get outside and escape the indoors. Thanks!